Welcome back to Stories from the Ashes, where we pontificate on good books and the stories that define and refine us. I'm Amber, and I'm here with Amanda and our special guest today, Mary Banducci, who you may know from Instagram as Apothecary Mary. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on here today.
We are so glad to have you here. For just our listeners, Mary is sitting outside and she has this ginormous wood pile behind her, and I am just jealous about it. It's so beautiful.
You have an enormous wood pile too.
It was a lot of hard work
behind me. So Mary lives in northern Idaho, and do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Are you married? Do you have kids?
I am married to my wonderful husband, Paul, and we have 2 kids and 2 shaggy dogs. We homeschool here in North Idaho, and we actually moved farther out into the country so we could have a little bit of land which to forage and let our kids grow up in nature.
That's beautiful. We try to get to know our guests through some of their favorite books. So do you want to share 3 of your favorite books with us that have been influential in your life or just that you really loved?
I would love to do that. So actually, books really come to me and are like a balm for my soul. Mm-hmm. And usually I find I'm reading the perfect book for the situation that I'm in. So we moved out here and we had a plan to enjoy this life. And we actually ended up having to do a lot of mold remediation and construction and living amidst that when you thought you bought a house that's whole and was listed as one thing, but was completely different. It was just chaos and a little bit traumatic, and trying to homeschool. And my husband was also being prosecuted by the state. I would say persecuted because that's what it felt like.
Probably both.
More of his story at the Racketeer Lounge. But during all of that, I actually had a couple books that I reread. I read them as like a teenager, and then I was rereading, kind of going through my library shelf. And they just spoke to me in a different way. So I really enjoyed, I brought them with me. I really enjoyed Chalice by Robin McKinley. And I actually have this card that during the time that I was reading this book or rereading this book, I saw this card in a grocery store and I was like, I need that for myself. So I bought myself a card. It said, "This will make a great story someday."
Oh.
And then on the inside, it says, "But today we celebrate." So I really liked that because it was a perspective shift for me. And I really I read her book, actually, Chalice, the same time I was reading The Next Right Thing by Emily P. Freeman. And it kind of tied perfectly together because I felt like her as a character, she's just doing the next thing and she doesn't always do it perfectly. And that spoke to my heart at the time. So here's my 2 books. And I really actually enjoyed this book, The Next Right Thing. She also has a podcast that she does, which I haven't listened to in a while, but I loved the first season of it. But there was one moment that I was in my kitchen, and my kitchen had no floor, and I was like straddling the joists, trying to like heat up oatmeal for my kids in the microwave. And like my kid had a problem like with math in the dining room where we had all of our stuff packed in because we had, we're living in different rooms of our house that aren't meant for it during the modeling and reconstruction. And the construction guys show up and I'm just like it was overwhelming and also just hard for me. And there was a part in this book that she's going through something really hard. And she said, "This is still a right like any other." And that reminded me that what I'm doing is important and what I was doing with my children meant something and it was worthy. So I really enjoyed that book at that time. And she works a little bit with herbs. It's a fantasy novel and I love fantasy because sometimes I feel like it's more true and real than real life because we were made for a different realm. We were made for something more practical than this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and then the other book I reread was called A String in the Harp by Nancy Bond. And I just loved this one as well. Reread it, I guess is what I should say. It's a family that their mother just passed away like the previous year. The daughter is coming from the United States to spend time with her family in Wales. And it's very much about being out in nature. And the character also decides not to go back to school, and she journals, which was a good prompting for me because I process things a lot by writing them down. So I also was journaling during this, and it just reminded me to be out of doors and that God is in control. So
yeah,
those are
I just started reading that book for the first time. That's my van book for when I'm waiting for the kids to come in and out of appointments.
Oh, cool. I love that. So A String in the Harp. She has.
Yeah,
have you read?
I'm far enough into it that the daughter has arrived and she's arrived at the house. So I've really just started it. But the way the author describes the cold, you can feel the cold, like the difference from the cold in the States to the cold in Wales coming in winter. It's like, oh yeah, that's cold.
She does an amazing job describing it, and like you feel like you are there in the moment. Well, I love that you're reading it too. I hope I didn't spoil it.
No. I love spoilers. It makes it more enjoyable for me.
I don't like them. But it looks like it won an award. What award did it win?
Is it a Newbery Honor or is it a Newbery? I think it's one of those two.
It's a Newbery Honor.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
That's why
and
you can see
like I've tabbed things. Like I do that to my books now.
Yeah.
I want to go back and be able to remember that. And actually my daughter just started reading this as well. So it's fun to be able to share books with her and then talk about it later.
How old is your daughter?
My daughter is just about to be 12.
Okay, so it's good for preteens then, you'd say?
Yeah, I would think it was okay for. I think it's definitely okay for my preteen. I don't know about other. Like there is the tragic passing of the mother and like the family dealing with that. So I guess content consideration for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So you tab your pages, which is totally fine. They're your books. You can do what you want. I underline in my books, and the best thing that I've ever learned for underlining. So I used to not underline as much because I need a straight line. I don't like it when my line is uneven and gets into the text. Amanda can laugh at me all she wants, but it annoys the crap out of me the second time I'm reading through, and I can't read well because my own underlining is blocking the text. And so one of my friends when I was probably 20, I was watching him read his Bible, and I'm like, why do you have a playing card in your Bible? And he's like, to underline. And I'm like, oh. So now I use playing cards as bookmarks, and then all I have to do is rotate it sideways, and it's a straight line. And it's about if you get the taller playing cards, it's about the width of the text if you wanted to do the full line. But I've also started collecting stiffer bookmarks to use for straight edges, to like shorter ones, because I don't like the really long ones. They get bent because I just throw the book in my purse and then the bookmark's all bent. But if it's short enough to go into the pages but long enough to go across the text, I like those for a good straight edge.
That's a great idea.
That's a good use for all the playing cards you don't need when you're playing euchre.
Yes, exactly. Keep a euchre deck and then you have all these extra playing cards.
You could also use cards. You could start buying yourself a card per book.
Yeah. This might sound inappropriate to some people, but those cards that they give you at funerals, when they laminate them, they're the exact right length, because my dad's card got laminated, and so I have that in some books. And then we were really good friends with Margaret Vinci Helt, and she was the beehive queen. Like, she created the beehive hairstyle back in the 60s, and was this like fashion icon. But she was Catholic, and so hers has a really long Catholic prayer and a picture of the saint on the back. So it's bigger than just the photograph. So that one is like the perfect size. And it's always nice to be reminded of the people that you love who aren't there. So I love using their cards as bookmarks. And I have my grandpa's card in some books. So it's always nice because I read a lot of books at the same time. Like sometimes I'll have like 30 books going, and it'll take me a couple years to get through all of them, just rotating through. And so then you come back to a book after a 6-month break and you're like, I love these people that are in this book. I forgot they were reading along with me. So I really like to use those cards in the books as well.
I love that it takes you 6 months. I love that you have lots of books going at once.
Yes. Well, my interests, I think it's like the ADHD. Like my interests vary from day to day and my mood varies. And if I'm feeling really excited today, I don't want to read a downer. But if I'm really feeling kind of like moody with the rainy weather, I don't really want to read some book where she's like, life is sunshine. It's like, it's not sunshine. It's sitting in front of the fireplace with a cup of hot chocolate and the rain going. Like, let's find a book that fits this. So I like to read through those. And for nonfiction books, I do a ton of just reading individual chapters. And I know some people think that's terrible, but it works for me. Like if I bought a book because I'm interested in a specific topic the author covers, I'll generally read the intro to get the overview of their belief system and application of everything. And then I'll just skip to the chapter about what's applicable to my life or my kid's life or the research I'm looking for on this specific learning disability or this specific thing that's, you know, physical disability that's being talked about in that chapter. And then the rest of the book's great to have as a resource if I need it later. And sometimes a few years later, I'll come back to a book and be like, okay, now I need this chapter. But it served me well to be able to read in more of my nonfiction books than I would if I felt like I had this loyalty to the book to read the entire thing cover to cover. Like the books are here to serve us, not the other way around.
We started reading How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler, and that, not very far in, but that has given me like some freedom to do that because there's different types of reading and you don't have to, you're not like obligated to do the same type of reading for each book.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's good.
Well, Mary, I love your Instagram page. One, you are completely hysterical in some of your videos. I was loving your thread of videos when you were out paintballing with your husband and you were in the paintball gear, so if you accidentally got hit by a stray bullet you wouldn't get too hurt, but you're just out foraging in the paintball field, and I loved that so much. But I saw yesterday that you guys have been collecting rose hips. Is that a current video? Is rose hips something that you're doing right now?
I haven't actually made a video of that recently, but that's something that we're doing right now. Today, as part of our family time, we're going to be processing rose hips and probably listening to a book.
Yeah.
we do a lot of audiobooks, living where we live, driving into town and driving home. And then while we're doing things, folding laundry and processing rose hips, processing elderberries. So we're going to be spending a couple hours doing that today.
That's really fun. Do you have your book queued up already? Do you know what you'll be listening to?
We're listening to Galileo and the Stargazers because we're studying astronomy. So it's just a 1 hour audiobook by Jim Wyse, I believe.
Yeah. That'll be fun. So how did you get started with foraging? Is this a lifelong pursuit continued, or is this something that you really got into and caught the bug in the last few years?
So I started studying herbalism about 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. And I mostly did self-study. I took a couple classes. And then about 6 years ago, I was doing a nature walk with my daughter, and we're like going through the plants and like looking at this little book. And there was a picture of St. John's wort, and then there was the St. John's wort bush. And I thought, I have learned so much about this plant and how amazing it is. And like I've bought it online from, an herb source, and like it's growing in my backyard as a weed. So that was sort of like this revelation that even studying herbalism, I was still disconnected from the nature that was around me and how amazing the plants were. And the more I began to learn about it, the more it just felt like God was like putting plants in my life. Like I remember we used to live in a suburban neighborhood, and we tried to maintain the front of our yard as best as we could. I didn't want to use like a weed spray just because that's how I felt. And I remember like pulling up this dock. It was called curly dock, but I didn't know what it was at the time. And I was just like yanking it. And I was thinking to myself, like, I wish this had a use. And it was the day after that I was playing a card game with my kids. I got a foraging like card deck. You can get those on Amazon. And we used to play Go Forage instead of Go Fish. So instead of like pulling up a card when you say Go Fish, it was Go Forage and they'd pull up a card. But so we were seeing different plants all the time as we were playing this game. And I saw that plant as I pulled it up and I was like, that it does have a use. So then just kind of like spitballed or spiraled down, maybe you want to say, into just this amazing interest. I had, having lived in this house for a little bit, and the mold and being around the mold has turned on some autoimmune things for me. So I was having some digestive problems and taking my kids to a horseback riding lesson. And there was a new plant, and it's like, I know, like I recognize you. And I figured out what it was and then learned about it. And it was something that absolutely was going to help me heal in that moment. So it just
What
feels
was
like it was self-heal. It's called self-heal or all heal. And it's a purple, like it almost looks like a little fat, like lavender, but like short.
Yeah, I have yet to find that. I've been looking.
Yeah, it won't, it has like a 2-week period where it blooms and it's just kind of all over this place.
Okay.
And then it just kind of disappears. And you're like, where did it go?
Yeah. So how do you pronounce this plant? Mullien.
Mull. Oh, Mullen.
Mullen.
Sorry,
okay,
Mullen.
that's what I was saying, but then I think I like had a creative pronunciation of it one day and Amanda was like, what are you saying? But Mullen, okay.
I've always said mullion. I know I'm
Mullion.
Totally off.
So I was like, before I say it 30 times in a row, I think I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly. So you did a video on Mullen a couple of months ago, and it was a complete answer to something I just put out there, these nighttime walks that the kids and I have been taking. Our next door neighbor is a bit of a loner. He's a single gentleman, fought in the Vietnam War, has some serious PTSD issues, and I just found out recently lost the love of his life like the month before their wedding and never married after that.
No.
And so that definitely gave me a different view on him as well. But he bought the lot when the houses in our community were all being built, and our house was already being built. So he got stuck with a neighbor on one side, but he bought the empty lot on the other side because he wanted space between him and his neighbor. And so it's the one wooded lot on our street is next to his house. And when we moved in, it was just full of trees, and there were raspberries that would grow along the outside, and that was about it. Like during the spring you could see trillium growing in among the trees, but it was really dense. And then we had the derecho land hurricane a few years ago, and it really thinned out the trees. So now there's a whole lot of new stuff growing there. So there were these plants at the edge of it right by the sidewalk that we would see on our nighttime walk. And it's a little bit of a hill, so because of the hill effect, these plants were about as tall as I was, and I had not seen them before. And I was like, what is this? And I just kept over and over every night. I'd be like, I need to Google this when we get home. But then we'd get home and it'd be dark, so I couldn't take a picture of it to try to identify it. And then you did a video on Mullen, and you're like, this is Mullen. And I was like, it's Mullen. And so the next time Amanda was over, she and Matt were getting over a really bad cough. And I just sent the girls out. I was like, go grab some of those Mullen leaves that Mr. Ed said we could grab. And so they went and got them, and I made them tea, and we were talking about it. And I'd also used the leaves earlier that week for Nara's best friend who had a cough, and gone home with her, and her mom called me and she's like, Bethany says we have this on our property. What am I looking for? I was like, yes, you're looking for this Mullen plant. And so Amanda did some research on it and saw that like when forests, what was it, Amanda? Like when
this wasn't research. Because you made that tea for me because I had run out of my tincture. I had used it in the previous herb. I'd run out, and I've been noticing that I only ever see it in wooded areas that have a lot of sunlight. So any areas where the trees have been knocked down, I see it proliferate.
That was it. Yeah, when the trees have been knocked down. And that's what had just happened. Like we had just gone through the storm. All these trees had been knocked down, and now there was space for this Mullen to grow. So I
Wow.
was very appreciative to you, Mary, for covering the Mullen so that I knew what I had growing 2 doors down.
It's awesome too because it seems like those plants, and maybe it's just because we're observing them because we need them, but they seem like they pop up when we need them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's providence for sure.
Yeah,
I've
but you see that
noticed
in
that.
nature a lot, like the fact that
Yeah.
jewelweed grows right by poison ivy. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times, what you need to fix an exposure to something else is there. I'm still
Yeah.
trying to find jewelweed in our yard. Eric, my husband, is very, I want to say deathly. I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but it has landed him in the ER. So
Ooh.
he's very allergic to Virginia creeper, which is that plant that like grows like an ivy up stuff and turns
Yeah.
red in the fall, and it's really pretty, but it's invasive and we cannot eradicate it from our yards. We've been trying for like 9 years, but I'm like, I feel like something like jewelweed should be growing in my yard too to help offset this, but maybe I just don't know how to identify it.
I found some in muscatine, but I
Oh,
don't see it very often.
yeah.
But I've noticed what has made a difference for me in the foraging is going back to the same
Place.
place over and over and over again. So now I have like, I go with my little Seek app and I scan everything because silly me, I didn't listen to my grandpa when he told me what everything was when I was a child. And so now I have no idea. So I go around with my phone and scan everything. But now I know when I go to this park, the mulberries are here, the wild ginger's here, the bloodroot's here, the mulleins here. It's nice to have more of a relationship.
Yeah.
But with that,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mary, what
And
do you
they're
tell beginners? Like, do you have 3 tips to not kill yourself while foraging?
yeah. Um I have I call them my 4 no's, not no as in no, don't do something, but no as in no in your mind, and
mm-hmm.
know your plant. Be like
Mhm.
100% certain of the plant before you use it or eat it.
Mhm.
They're especially like mushrooms, but there are other plants that have some poisonous lookalikes,
Mhm.
and check several different sources. So I actually use the Seek app too, and I like to use that
Mm-hmm.
as kind of like a calendar of where and when I see things.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely like check local resources, different foraging books, and I have a list on my blog that is foraging resources, and then know the ecosystem, know your land. Actually, first know your land. You don't want to pull from something that is going to have like toxic soil, because a lot of those plants, those
Mhm.
weeds, they're pulling those nutrients from the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want
Right.
to pull them from those types of toxic areas. And then if you need to ask an owner, like, we want foraging to be this like beautiful thing that blesses people and not like going trespassing on someone's land. So that's
Right.
part of knowing your land. Know your ecosystem. We're part of a larger whole, and we want those plants to
Mhm.
come back. So don't over harvest, and leave
Mm-hmm.
some not only to repopulate, but to also feed others, I mean, other animals or gatherers. So, and then
Mhm.
know your purpose. Listen to your body. Know what you're planning to do with the plant. If you just pull a bunch of stuff and don't do anything with it, then that can be a waste. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
those are
I
my
love
4 notes.
that. My
And
uncle, when he would go ahead.
I was gonna say that you might not have jewelweed, but you probably have plantain, and that
Yeah.
is amazing skin soother. So
Yeah. I need to tincture some plantain so I can spray it on, because all the things that I have plantain in right now are salve, and Eric's reaction is like ginormous blisters and
ooh,
all this,
yeah.
and we don't really want to rub anything on it, but I want something I can just like spray on. And I've gotten a
Mm-hmm.
jewelweed spray from Etsy before, and that was nice, but I was like, I kind of want to know that it's fresh and it's the most potent that it's going to be. But with what you were saying about making sure that you like leave some for later, I'm sure a lot of people do this, but my uncle would always forage for mushrooms, and he would take those mesh bags, and he would always
Mm,
carry his bags home in mesh so that the mushroom spores would spread throughout the forest as he was walking and fall out of the bag and go everywhere. So things like that are just
yeah,
a nice
that's an
way to
awesome
spread
idea.
spread things around.
I haven't mentioned my third
Yeah.
book.
Oh, yeah.
Right now we're re-listening to The Horse and His Boy, and that is actually one of my favorite. That's my favorite Chronicles of Narnia. I don't know.
Me too.
Well, that's
Oh, I
fun.
love that. And it's just
Yeah.
kind of that, like, the shot when Shasta gets to the end, or at least he thinks it's the end, and he's like ready to relax, and it's like, no, no, you have more to go. I think that often speaks to my heart because I'm an Enneagram 9, so I just want to like be comfy. I just want the world to like be good, and we moved out here to kind of have this space of growth and beauty, and it was really hard at first. So
Yeah.
that would definitely be my third book.
I like that.
So you were telling us about a new genre that you're liking, and I want to hear about that.
So I found a word recently called Hopepunk, and an author originalized the idea, and it's sort of the opposite of Grimdark, which is very much populating our fiction and our literature
TV.
and our entertainment right now. And Hopepunk is the opposite of it. It's bringing light to the dark parts of the world. It's ultimate kindness. Actually, I'll read the definition if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Works in the Hopepunk subgenre are about characters fighting for positive change, radical kindness, and communal responses to challenges. And Lord of the Rings is a great example of that. But when I heard that word, I just felt like this, oh my gosh, that describes me. Like I'm a hope punk.
Yeah.
I'm a punk, but in a hope way. And last night, as I was thinking about this podcast, God gave me the verse. It's in Hebrews, I think. And now I'm forgetting the actual. I'll try to remember, and you guys can put it in the notes. But hope does not disappoint. And I thought that is so true. Like if you can continue to hope, it does not disappoint. So
that's true. Yeah.
I love that. I also really appreciate all the authors that are writing in that genre right now and pushing back against the darkness. Amanda and I just did an interview with S.D. Smith and J.C. Smith for the new book Jack Zulu and the Waylander's Key, and that definitely would fall into that hope punk category in my mind. And
I see there's this kind of revolution that's in opposition to the grimdark that's happening, creating those hope punks.
Yeah.
I think I need a t-shirt that says hope punk.
Yes.
Definitely
get those going.
So what have you been reading that fits into that category?
So we currently in our homeschool are reading the Mistmantle Chronicles. And that definitely fits into that category. And I actually found it because of Reshelving Alexandria. I found a book in a thrift store, and I posted a picture of it in the Facebook group of Reshelving Alexandria. And I was like, should I buy this? And it was the third one, which is actually was originally like $60 to $80 on eBay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, yes, jump at it. Like, you need to buy it, or if you don't want it, buy it and I'll pay you for it. So I bought it, and then I started looking for book 1 and book 2. And I think I found book 1 on Thrift Books, and then a friend gave me book 2, actually. So we just started that series, and I'm really excited for that one. So we're just like halfway into it, and we read it in our morning time, and the kids are always like, can we do one more?
The mark of the best books.
Yes, they are really good.
I'm so glad that Jill from Purple House Press was able to get the rights to republish those.
Absolutely.
And is working with the author on some fun new bonuses as well. I've heard rumbles of, so that'll be exciting. I'm waiting for her to get them all done and do the hardcover boxed set on Kickstarter that I heard is coming. That's exciting, but I have not read those. I know Amanda's read 3 or 4 of them.
3. I've read the first 3.
Okay.
And then I think we have the 4th one, but I haven't read it yet. But I love that they're not like a cliffhanger-y thing. So if you're not buying them or not reading them because you're worried you're going to get stuck on a cliffhanger, that's not the case. And I really like that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And we've had conversations before about the fact that they are a little darker and heavier. Obviously that hope is shining through, but the hope is overcoming something, right? So the darkness that the hope is overcoming is fairly dark. And so sometimes we have these conversations where we compare series to other series and try to rank them in level of intensity. And so where did you think that those fell, Amanda, with like the Green Ember books and the and you can chime in too, Mary, if you've read these, the Green Ember books and the Wingfeather Saga and some of those other
I thought they
fantasy
were,
series.
in my opinion, they're see, I like to say that the Mistmantle Chronicles aren't good versus bad. They're good versus evil. And the
Mm-hmm.
evil is pretty bad.
Evil.
So I think it's a little heavier. You have to be ready for it. It's a little heavier than like the Wingfeather, or definitely heavier than the Green Ember, I would say.
Yeah.
But what do you
I'd say
think,
that.
Mary?
I would say that as well. I haven't we listened to a couple of the Green Ember. My kids listened to all of them, but I haven't listened to all of them. We actually read a chapter from sort of Captain Husk's perspective. And that was like, he's dealing with evil things and it's showing how evil it is. So I think that's a really good explanation of good versus evil. And
Mm-hmm.
it definitely, the hope shines through, but there's definitely like moments
Definitely.
that I think little kids wouldn't enjoy. So
Yeah, definitely. If your kid's ready for the Holocaust, this should just be fine. But if that's too much to discuss on any level, I would not give them
Yeah.
the Mismantle Chronicles until they were
yeah,
ready
there's a
developmentally.
murder right off the bat, pretty much. So
Yeah.
I would take that into
Yeah.
consideration.
Yep.
I also think it's interesting how differently these books hit parents than kids, just because of our life experience and our deeper understanding of the ramifications of things that are happening.
Yeah.
We read the Green Ember series when my girls were younger, and it it does have a culling. Like, the young rabbits are being taken and eaten by
Mhm.
the birds. And then I know Amanda was talking about the culling of young that
Mhm.
happens in the Mistmantle series and how hard that was for her. And I know it was hard for me to know that was going on in the Green
Mhm.
Ember, but my kids were just like, bummer. Next. Like, like it didn't really hit them the same
I think
way.
I think what makes the Mismantle a little harder is that they're culling their own.
Mm,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's not for like, coming from a hunting family, it's, eating is you eat, and
Yeah.
it's sad, but
Did you read the
you
Green Ember books, Amanda?
mhm,
Because you just may not be remembering this, but
maybe I'm not.
they're calling their own in the Green Ember series because there are some evil rabbits who have been put as overlords over the rabbits by the birds,
Yeah.
and they're facilitating this calling on behalf of the rulers.
Yes, on
So in
behalf
that
of
way, like, they are calling their own, but it's not like a family calling its
they're
own.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just kind of viewed that as opposite sides
Yeah.
in like a war, as
Yeah.
opposed to, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little more similar than I was remembering.
Yeah. But I do just think it's always interesting how blasé my kids are about some of the things where I'm just like a blubbering mess over
Yeah.
there. I'm like, I have life experience. I know what it would feel like as a mother to like have my child ripped from me, and like you guys are just like, okay, just next chapter. Move
It's the
it along,
parenthood,
mom.
I
Stop
think.
crying.
It's becoming a parent that does that to you, I think.
Yes. Yeah. I really like you have a foraging library on your blog, and there's a great collection of books there for people that want to get into foraging and have some experience in foraging. I went ahead and ordered your number one recommendation, but do you want to talk about your top recommendations for people?
Yeah, I think if you're beginning foraging, Wild Edibles by Sergei Botenko, I hope I'm
Mhm.
not butchering his last name, is an awesome resource. It
That's the
is
one we ordered. It's
oh,
beautiful.
I actually got to meet him a couple years ago when I was starting my foraging journey, and he actually
Nice.
originally came out with a foraging deck. And I don't think he sells those anymore, but there are other options on Amazon. But I think it's a great resource. The pictures are like, there are a lot of pictures. They're very
Mhm.
clear. There's a ton of information about each part of the plant. And I think that's a great resource. I think something local as well. So Wild Edibles is a lot of things that will be local in the United States. So
Yeah.
something local. There is a series called the Regional Foraging Series, And this one is the Mountain States Foraging. This is the one that I use. But there are by different authors, but they have different regions. So I would definitely recommend something for your region because you're going to have unique stuff that I won't have here. And I think just continuing to read those plants and observe them and be out in nature is a great way to start foraging. If you're interested in like the remedy side of plants, because I really think there are recipes and remedies right outside your door. If you're interested in that, I would recommend Wild Remedies.
Okay.
That one is also a great resource.
Yeah.
And it has actually like, how do you use, not only like here are the ways that the plants help you, but here are some recipes on how to use the plants. So it's both practical and informational.
Yeah, I really love that.
Have you ever looked into homeopathy?
A little bit. And I keep several things on hand, like arnica. I keep that on hand. I keep magnesium phosphorica, like for food poisoning or stomach issues. Yeah. And then I do actually keep Hypericum perforatum, which is St. John's wort, on hand for like nerve pain, tooth problems, and that type of thing. That's something in the future I'd love to learn more about.
What's been blowing my mind lately is I got this really old book that has like it's a home medical book, and it has like allopathic, homeopathic, and herbal remedies all like together in one.
This is the book you got that's like a tome, right?
It's like a tome, yeah. Anyway, it's super interesting. It's available on archive. I can't find a cheap copy. I borrowed this. I have to give it back. But what I've noticed when I've been looking into herbalism versus homeopathy is a lot of the homeopathic remedies are also herbal remedies, but the herbal version herbal version of it, like bloodroot is a homeopathic remedy, but I was looking at it and it was saying, this is toxic, so take 1 drop of a tincture in a full glass of water. It's like, oh, a lot of these herbal remedies that like the dosage is teeny tiny are also homeopathic remedies. Just, it was blowing my mind.
Yeah. It's all kind of interconnected.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Homeopathy has been a huge blessing for our family because our eldest son is autistic, and for the first 9 years of his life was very resistant to swallowing anything that he didn't want. He had, I don't even remember what it's called right now, but he had some childhood thing where he got these blisters all around his mouth and face. It starts with a C, whatever it was. And we had tried every herbal remedy under the sun for it, all these natural things that we knew. And we went in and finally our pediatrician, who's very natural minded and had been helping us through all of these natural remedies, was like, he needs an antibiotic. So we went in and got it. And after 2 days of my husband and I both trying every known thing under the sun to get him to swallow this, and even if we got it down him, he would just reject it immediately. We had to take him in and get a shot. Like, he had to get an antibiotic shot because there was no other way to get him to swallow stuff. So what I love about homeopathy is that it's basically sugar pills. Like, that's what that's what it is to a kid. You know, it's just a sugar pill. It doesn't have any flavor. It's not offensive. And you can put it in water and it'll dissolve. And then if they're going to drink water or juice or whatever, they can get the full dose even more potently through their beverage. And it has kept us out of the hospital with him more times than I can count. And knowing how traumatic a hospital visit would have been with him at those ages, there was one night when everybody had some form of like bronchitis, really bad. And I was laying in bed next to him and he sounded like he was sawing wood, and his breathing in his sleep was getting more and more labored. And I was like, if this doesn't change, I have to take him in for some sort of breathing treatment. Like, I can't give him any of the herbal stuff that everybody else is on, these like cough syrups and all this. He won't take anything. And it's getting to the point where I'm pretty laid back. I'm not a helicopter parent. Like, I'm pretty just like, let it run its course. But I was concerned for him. And I was like, I'm going to have to do something. And I just kept thinking, it sounds like he's sawing wood. It sounds like he's sawing wood. And I Googled and I was like, homeopathic remedy, sawing wood. And that was it. Like, because they're all based, like, they're not based on diagnosis. They're all based on symptoms. And there it was. Cough sounds like sawing, or wheezing sounds like sawing wood. And I put the remedy under his tongue. Within 5 minutes, he was breathing fine. One dose. That was it. And he was like fine and slept through the night. And I was able to sleep through the night. And that was like the turning point for me, where I was like, I have to know more about this to protect him from medical interventions that he is going to be traumatized by otherwise. And so I started taking homeopathic classes online at that point and got all the books and have all sorts of stuff. And it's been such a blessing to our family. And we use a lot of herbs with the older kids for more mild things that I just, want their system to fight through and whatnot. But for nightly, we always go straight to the homeopathy, and it just it kicks it so fast.
So what would you recommend starting to learn about that?
There's Joette, Joette, and then her last name starts with a C.
Calabrese.
Yeah, Calabrese. Yeah. She offers really good classes, but there's a new homeopathy homeschool curriculum that's Charlotte Mason philosophy based, and that is really good. I was a beta tester for that, and I plan to go through it with the girls probably in the spring. Our fall semester is already like booked too heavily for me. But once we drop a whole bunch of these classes, when we finish them, I'm going to try to add that one in, because the girls are really good at some of this stuff, and they just have the remedies that we use the most often, that they're familiar with, that they know to go for, or even to recommend to their friends. And I'm always getting forwarded messages from Inara and her best friend, and she's like, this is what I think she should take, but this is her symptom set and how it's presenting. Am I missing something? So I want to empower them to be able to do this better. So Joette's classes are really good. And then the homeschool curriculum was actually written by one of Joette's ghostwriters. So she's highly knowledgeable as well. And I don't remember why, but her family does a lot of international travel for her husband's job. I don't remember what it is, but when I was taking Joette's class, she was teaching it, and she was in Hungary. So there's like the big time difference. But like in Europe, they use homeopathy for almost everything. And so she was really appreciating having, like a homeopathic pharmacy down the street and things of that nature that I'm jealous about.
It's in a little, like, Joe's Boys. It's in Joe's Boys a lot, too.
Yeah. Louisa May Alcott definitely was a strong proponent for homeopathy. So, yeah. But that's where I would start is I would just sign up for Joette's newsletter, because that comes out and it she just does like a short synopsis of, if this is the type of situation you're dealing with, what would you do? And if it's of interest to you, then you can just click on the link to the article, and then she just breaks it down. There's so many free resources just in her articles. Like that's where that's the article I always forward to people when they're like, we had, a tick bite. What do we do to prevent Lyme? And I've driven out to Amanda's with remedies before when she didn't have them on hand. Like the first time, it's like, here's the remedies. And I most of my friends know I'm willing to drive halfway. Like wherever you are in the country, I will drive halfway and give you what you need. If you're in Iowa, I'll probably drive the whole way. But like otherwise, I'll drive halfway and meet you if you need something immediately, and I have it on hand. So yeah,
it's true friendship.
These are just, I think I've shared this before, but my other mother, when I was growing up, Mrs. Brown, the Lord only allowed her to have one child, and she wanted a whole lot more. And so she just adopted all these other kids in her life. And she always said that the world is so full of people, and you only come across a certain number in your life. And so she truly believed that any child that the Lord brought into her path was for a reason and was her responsibility. And so I don't know how many thousands of kids she still prays for on a regular basis today, because they crossed her path at some point and in her mind became her responsibility. But that's how I feel about my friends. Like you only have so many friends in your life, and the Lord only brings so many people into your life. And a lot of these people are friends with me because they pursued me when I was not able to pursue other people. When we had the fire and all of this, my now really good friend Tracy just started sending me a meme every day. Like I didn't know her from Adam. Like she was just somebody in one of the groups, and she just started sending me this funny meme. And we actually found a term on TikTok. This woman said that it's penguin pebbling, and she said this is what our friends do. Like penguins will gift each other pebbles for their nests, and they'll just like show up and drop a pebble and leave, and like that's their like little gift. And so it's really good for neurodiverse people who may not want to talk all the time, or may not be able to have a conversation about what they're doing, or you may not know what to say to someone that you care about, that you want them to feel better, but you can just like come and you can drop your little meme, which is just like dropping your little pebble, and it's this little like, I'm thinking about you and I care, have a good day, and like no words necessary. And so I was like, I always say that Tracy penguin pebbled me into a friendship, and she did. But now we're like really good friends. So
I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah. But my notes just dropped, but I know I had another question. Marshmallows. I want to talk about marshmallows. They're like my favorite thing. They're my favorite thing to come out of herbs in a long time. It's like best things in sliced bread.
I love talking about marshmallows. So marshmallows originally, like they're a plant. I have a video on how to make them. I have a recipe on my blog on how to make like new modern marshmallows, but usually using the marshmallow plant. And originally,
I will link to all of those in the show notes. So if you guys want to find this marshmallow information and Mary's blog, they'll all be linked there.
A lot of these like remedies were used in ancient times and medieval times. And there's records of marshmallow root being pulled up and boiled, and then like boiled in honey. And then people would suck on them to soothe sore throats. And I think it was around the 1800s that the French took that idea and they like added meringue to it, which was the first like kind of like the marshmallows we have today. Of course, the marshmallows we have today don't have the plant in them, but the original idea came from the plant. And if you want to make them with the plant, I have that recipe. So originally, I actually did this. I love learning information that fills my cup, and I love sharing that information that I learn. So before I started foraging, I had a different blog, and it was Infusions of Herbal Living. And I had some fun recipes. I kind of did recipe creation mixed with my photography, because I was originally a wedding photographer, and then I moved into food photography. So all this conglomeration of stuff that I've kind of compiled together. But so I decided I wanted to do like a whole week of marshmallow recipes. And I like created and tweaked that marshmallow root marshmallow. And that was probably my favorite thing out of all the things, because who doesn't love marshmallows? But
I love them.
I've actually noticed the more I eat marshmallow, like the better my complexion looks. So I just need to make more marshmallows and eat it.
I love that marshmallows can be a health food, you know? It's like so much gelatin and all this good stuff for you. It's like when people break down cake and say that cake is a breakfast food because it's a grain and a protein and all this stuff's in cake. It's like there's your eggs and flour and milk. Why not?
My daughter's been trying to tell me that chocolate is a salad. It's like,
my dad always says chocolate's a vegetable because it's a bean. So
yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I just love the fact that with foraging and all of this, it really just drives home the A.A. Milne quote that I love that says, "Weeds are flowers too, once you get to know them." And so many of them are so beneficial. And if you love Agatha Christie, even the non-beneficial ones are good for murder. So we have all this nightshade growing in the backyard right now, like taller than my husband, and we bought this house, and it has this steep slope, and we bought it covered in snow. So we did not realize that there was no grass growing and that it's this steep slope. And the previous owners, I guess, had like 5 dogs, and they just peed everywhere and killed all the grass, and it was heavily shaded. And then we had the storm. And now it's not heavily shaded, and we had a couple trees taken down. And so now all those weed seeds that have been sitting there for a century are all having their time to shine. And because of my husband's allergy to the Virginia creeper and because of my chronic illness, we just can't figure out what to do about this. We are strongly considering bringing Amanda's sheep over and just having them clear the space for us. It
Great
seems like the most viable option at this point. But with all this nightshade out there, we've actually been doing research between like the different types of nightshades, because I guess deadly nightshade is the one that actually will just like kill you on one berry, but the other ones are not nearly as toxic. And I'm really allergic to the nightshade family, so tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, all of that. So I can't just go out and grab this stuff because then I'll be unable to move my joints for a week. And but I told Eric, I was like, well, when you pull up the nightshade, throw a few berries in the freezer. You never know when you got to kill somebody. And he's like, you read too many murder mysteries. I am all about preparedness, okay? These things could be worth a lot on the black market in a zombie apocalypse. You just don't know.
I think
actually that brings up, the zombie apocalypse, and people think they're going to be hungry, and it's like, there's so many plants you could forage.
Yes.
But
I still just prefer the animals to eat the plants. Like the plants are the food that my food eats. That's
that's my preference.
They can process it, and then I'll get the nutrients through eating beef. That's my view.
There is a book called A Weed is a Flower, and I think it's just A Weed is a Flower by George. It's about George Washington Carver. It's a picture book. It was I love the story of George Washington Carver, and we listened to an audiobook about him as well. But he's an amazing man who took what everyone thought was a weed and made so many different possibilities with it.
Yeah, he's incredible. The Messner biography on his life, I'd read a lot of biographies on him as a kid and fell in love with him then. And then as an adult, so I don't know if the books that I read when I was younger didn't include the letter that he got from Booker T. Washington and just referenced it, but like it wasn't a direct quote, or if, again, as a kid, it just didn't hit me the same that it hits me now. But in the Messner biography, it includes the letter that Booker T. Washington sent to George Washington Carver, who was doing very well for himself out here at Iowa State College. And Booker writes in this letter and basically is like, I can't pay you. And like, or if I pay you, it's going to be nothing compared to the scale of what you're being paid. But the poverty that our people are facing here and the lack of knowledge that they have on how to provide for themselves is going to kill everyone. And this is a little more dramatic than how he said it. He said it in a more gripping way. I'm probably embellishing, but it basically was like, this poverty is intense and we have no one to teach them how to pull themselves up out of this hunger and just inability to provide for themselves on the soil that's here and all of this. And he's like, I need you to come, because he was starting the Tuskegee Institute. And he did not think that George would come, but it was his Hail Mary, basically. And it said that like George carried the letter around with him for a few days, and then he just sent a telegram or letter back, and it basically was just one line, and it's like, I'm coming. And that was it. Like, that was his response. And then he retired from, the wealth and everything that he was going to accumulate and notoriety and all this here at Iowa State, and then went down and changed the world and changed the lives of so many people and all this. But I just those two words, I'm coming, they just like hit me so hard. And just Booker T's impassioned plea, and it's just I love that man. He's such a
ready.
guy.
Are we ready for that? Ready to be called?
Yeah. And to drop everything and say, I'm coming. That's what Eric always talks about. He always talks about being ready. And with the fire and all this, he's like, we have to get our house in order. We have to get our finances in order. We need to be ready to go or to help or to be able to give more and be prepared with knowledge, be prepared with resources, just to help people as they need it, as things just don't seem like they're getting easier in the world around us. So yeah, I love reading biographies like that. And I feel like they stir something in you, and they give you lampposts along the way. Like, this person did this and this person did this and lighted the path for others. And how can we shed a little bit of light on the path for those coming behind us?
Those are definitely Hopepunk, not Hopepunk.
Yes.
Hopepunk.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely think so many, especially the Messner biographies. I feel like those are really written focused on the hope that people gave. Even the stories that just end in tragedy, like their lives have this tragic loss, it highlights the hope portion of their life and what they did. I mean, except for Stalin, like that book was just a downer. But the majority of them, the people that we know for hopeful things, it does a really good job of highlighting that.
Yeah, it does. I actually included 2 of George Washington Carver's quotes in my Foraging Journal book. Everyone knows something. Most people know a lot of things, but it is the person who can organize what he or she knows that will get somewhere in life. When I actually listened to that, I was like, I'm going to create this Foraging Journal.
Yeah.
And then his other quote, which I really love, reading about nature is fine, but if a person walks in the woods and listens carefully, he can learn more than what is in books, for they speak with the voice of God. And he actually started his days every day by having a walk in nature. And that was sort of his like prayer time. I loved that.
Oh, nice.
That is beautiful. Can you show us the Foraging Journal again?
Yeah, sorry. It's a little dark here. So this
it's
is
a really pretty green with flowers on it.
Yeah.
And I love the dark spine that is very journal-esque. What do the pages look like? Do they have any writing prompts, or are they?
We do. So there are different sections in the Foraging Journal. There's like a plant profile section where you can fill out different information about plants that you forage. There is for like foraging trips. Like if you take a trip somewhere, you can like list what plants you found, where you found them, so you can go back and forage those again at the same time as well. And then a calendar section, so you can keep track of what different plants are in season, because I have often missed plants because I haven't been looking for them.
Yeah.
And then map area, and then an area for like recipes and stuff. So I created this sort of for myself, and then other people too, so that they can record the information that they learned, because I have a total mom brain and I forget things often. So.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that would be a great resource to go along with nature studies and things that people are just observing in their little circle of space around themselves. So I would recommend that to people looking to do nature study and understand more about the uses of the nature that is around them. We will link to that in the show notes as well. And did you say the George Washington Carver quotes are quotes that you personally wrote into it, or do you have quotes throughout it for people to read?
There are actually quotes throughout it. Like when the section changes, there's a quote also that kind of ties in to it as well. So I have a Jane Austen quote in here. I have a John Muir quote in here. And I have a Henry David Thoreau, all good things are wild and free.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's very nice. I do love that. I saw something that was new to me this weekend when we were up in Galena. I saw a hummingbird moth, and I'd heard about hummingbird moths, but I think in my mind they were much smaller. And when I saw it, I thought it was a hummingbird. And my brain did not want to think that what I was seeing was not a hummingbird. So I was like, look at this hummingbird. And Eric's like, I don't think that is a hummingbird. I think that's a bug. I'm like, it's not a bug. I was like, there is a bug called a hummingbird moth, but I don't think that this is it. And I'm looking at it, and my brain is like taking things in, like the fact that it has bug legs, the fact that it has antenna, and all this. And I'm just like, but that body is huge. It's huge body. Like, how can those little wings keep up such a huge body? And I was like, well, that's why it has to flap so hard, is to keep its fat body up. Like, I have never seen anything on butterfly or moth wings with such a fat body. Like, sometimes in little kid books, you'll see funny things where it's like basically the caterpillar now has wings. I think Bug's Life, right? Like, doesn't the caterpillar still basically have its caterpillar body even when it gets its wings at the end? And that's just not the way it is. But this thing looks like it's dense. It looks like it is a linebacker for football. Like, it is this like massively thick, dense body, and then these little moth wings fluttering like their life depends on it. But I got a video of it, and the way the sun was shining, like, I also got the reflection, like the shadow of the hummingbird moth on the cement next to it. So it's like it's in double time. It's like the hummingbird moth itself and then the shadow, and it's fluttering so fast. And of course, this is the video that Instagram decides the whole world needs to see. It's like the closest to viral any of my stuff has ever gotten. And I was like, it's a book page. Like, Instagram will not respect my book content. And instead it's like, let's show the butterfly, the hummingbird moth, to everyone. So I like woke up the next morning to like 300 likes on it and 5,000 views. And I was like, what just happened? I was like, but it's beautiful. So if anything's going to get some FaceTime, it might as well be God's creation, because it is just gorgeous looking. And it was a good reminder to me of how hard it is for people to change their mind about things that they think they know. And there's just that, like, your brain doesn't want to think that it's misinterpreting the information that it's received. So just in life on scale, right? Like, how many people are being told things that they refuse to believe, even though there's empirical evidence that that's the fact, because they've already believed this. And they're like, I can't find a way to make them compute, because I'm standing there looking at this thing and I was like, yeah, those aren't bird legs. Like, those are very clearly insect legs, and a whole lot of them, and antenna. But my brain still's like, it's a hummingbird. Like, those are the only things we've ever seen that flap like that and have a body that big. So clearly, but so I think it just helped me to be like, okay, I need to extend some grace to people, because my brain was like, no way, this is what that hummingbird moth is that you've heard about. I always think that those were like honorific titles, but it's like, no, it's like, it's a legit hummingbird, except it's a moth. It doesn't just have the markings or the coloring of something. So
I think that's so true in the world of weeds too, because we're often told, like, those are weeds, you should spray your yard, it should be like completely mowed. We lived in as I mentioned, we lived in a suburban neighborhood before, and as I was learning about foraging, we kept the front yard really, well maintained for a mom who had 2 kids and a husband who worked 60 hours. And the backyard, we thought we would do like an experiment and let like whatever grow. And we actually had a 6-foot white vinyl fence, so people couldn't like see into our backyard on accident. And we just let things grow. But we, in our neighborhood, we had people who didn't appreciate that. And we actually had a policeman show up at our door with a city citation order saying like, hey, you can't have weeds. And like in the city of Post Falls, that's where we lived, you cannot have weeds over 8 inches tall. So I asked him very like cordially, will you please define weeds? And he said, what? I was like, will you please define weeds? And he's like, well, and I can't remember him giving me a reason. So I actually said, I'll take you in my backyard and I'll show you what those plants are and how we use them. Sorry, I hope I'm not echoing.
Nope, you're good.
And so I went in the backyard with him, and he wrote several things down on his like notepad that he had. And he called me a couple days later, and he's like, "Your story checks out. Like, you can keep your weeds. You just have to mow."
You just have to what?
You have to mow the grass around it. So I did do that. Which actually made the backyard worse. We had neighbors who called the police over me growing wild tentacles in the backyard. And
thankfully,
so there is that sort of that cognitive dissonance. They've been told they're bad, they are bad, and really, I just want to be able to show people that you can have your weeds and eat them too. But I used one of the plants that was in my backyard, and I made crackers, and I brought it to the person who had called the police, because I knew who she was, and my heart went out to her because there's just this, she doesn't know. She's functioning at the best that she can where she's at. And I made her the crackers, and I said, you don't have to try them if you're not comfortable, but I made these from the plants that are growing in my backyard, and you might like them if you try them. And then I left her with those, and I never heard back from her if she tried them, and that's okay. But I do want there to be sort of a, just like George Washington Carver, not comparing myself at all to him,
Right.
but he, he revolutionized everyone's ideas on what peanuts and sweet potatoes were. And let's open our eyes to what the plants that God has given us have to offer. So
yeah,
that is my hope.
Yeah. Amanda lives in the middle of cornfields.
I do.
And I was taking, well, it's not just corn. I don't know what that plant.
Corn and soy.
Is it soy? I thought it was soy. So
Corn
I was bringing her daughter home from dance class last night. And as we were driving past the soy, I was like, I wonder what those plants are that are growing in the field that aren't the crop. Because there's a whole bunch that are like double the height, and they all look, except for like a couple of random pieces of corn, they look pretty uniform in what the plant is. And I was like, I wonder what that plant is. And my 10-year-old son in the back goes, it's a weed, Mom. And I was like, a weed is only a plant growing where you don't want it. Like, that's my firm belief. And I was like, if that was growing in a plot all of its own, it would be something. So I just want to know what that something is.
Even that, I have been learning about goat keeping and sheep keeping and all of that. And our pasture is full of what one would call weeds. It's ragweed. It's nothing but weeds. But most of the weeds are, we debated trying to seed with like pasture grasses, but most of the weeds there are actually more nutritious than pasture grasses. So it was like, why would I try and get rid of these things that are feeding my animals well and plant pasture grasses instead? It's just, it's what you know.
Yeah. And there are actually weeds. There are some invasive species, and there are like, one of the plants that I had a really hard time with was wild morning glory. They call it bindweed because it just binds.
Yes, we have that. It's terrible.
It kills them.
Do you know how to get rid of bindweed?
I do not, besides pulling it out. You?
Move.
Yeah, we did. It is awful, but I remember having that same kind of, okay, God, like, what is the use of this plant? Like, you created it, like, what's the purpose? And I remember one night I was doing dishes and looking at my wild weed jungle in the backyard, and the morning glories turned pink as the sun set. Like, they actually changed colors, and I didn't know that. So there's some beauty there's some usefulness to beauty too as well. But there are plants that could kill you. There are weeds that could do that. Like,
like my deadly nightshade.
Yeah. Just to know your plant. Go back to your 4 no's.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. This was very informative and encouraging. I'm all excited to start cataloging my books by Hopepunk. Just pull them all together into a Hopepunk list. But we will have all of this information on our show notes, and we'll have your Instagram page that's just lovely visually to follow, and your blog for recipes, and your foraging library for book recommendations for people that want to start building a foraging library. And hopefully we'll have you back and have more conversations later, because I'm sure your wealth of knowledge, we barely even plumbed the surface on it. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah. So if you guys have any books that you feel fall into the Hopepunk genre, we would love to hear about them in the comments. And if you have a plant that you were really excited to find out what its use was, we'd love to hear the story about that as well. And we thank you all for your time. And remember, the stories are truer than true.